So here's a quick review on scientific thinking and ecology for the test coming up. First off, you need to know that we follow the scientific method. The scientific method is there to help you answer questions and to come up with a logical solution. Remember, here's your steps of the scientific method. And on the data, if there's ever a question that gives you the data and it's a graph, don't ever read too much in the graph of the table. It is only there for the information they give you. So if they give you data on the growth of flamingos and the color of them, don't read too much into why that color is there. It just says color or no color, then that's all the data they give you. Remember, on the experiment details, the experiment needs to be valid, and that means that it has to have a testable hypothesis, it needs to have a large test group, and then it also needs to have a valid conclusion as well as a very large test group. Remember, there's a difference between single and double-blind studies. The single-blind study just basically means that the experimental group does not know who's the experimenter and who's not. Whereas double-blind means that those that are actually conducting the experiment don't know who has the experimental group and those that have the control group or the placebo. And the main thing here is that we talked a little bit about the limitation of science. That science can only answer those things that science can answer. They can't answer the mythological questions, and they can't answer that. They can only answer questions based on what facts and ideas they've gotten from research. The scientific theory, these are the three main. There's one more, but these are the main you want to know. The cell theory, basically two ideas that all cells, so if here's a cell, can only come from other cells. So that cell will make two more cells, and the cell that we started off with came from another cell. And then the other idea is that all living organisms, so you have your person, this person is made up of nothing but cells. It doesn't just come from something else. Evolution, and I'll talk more evolution here in just the next slide, but basically just remember that evolution is a theory that's been researched and researched and researched, and that's what a theory is. A theory is something that has been tested time and time and time again, and has been shown to be correct. And the last one you should really know is this idea of microorganisms make you sick. Remember, this was Louis Pasteur when he had that long, skinny flask, and he had it and he heated up all that chicken broth, and the chicken broth then cooked all the bad bacteria out, and nothing grew in there. But the moment that he cracked this flask, the moment he took away all that flask, and he took away the heat, little organisms started growing in the bottom of this flask. And again, it showed that it came from somewhere. So here's evolution. Make sure you remember that this is the definition of evolution. All it is a genetic change over a population, not an organism. Not a single crow can change evolution. It has to take the entire population of crow, and it has to be over an extended amount of time. Remember, the survival of the fittest does control evolution. If you have a trait that helps you run faster, get faster food, get more mates, that's going to continue on. It also allows for adaptation. And we talked about the finches. If you have a finch with a beak like this, and there's that finch, and you also have a finch that's a beak like this, then obviously they're going to eat different food. This one being a larger beak is going to eat things like large nuts and berries, whereas this one's going to eat things like insects because it has a long skinny beak. This is determined again, so that's where that food creates an evolutionary change as well as geographical separation. A lot of times if you have an island, and right down the middle of the island there is a large body of water or a mountain or something like that, a mountain range is going to stop a transfer of organisms back and forth. And finally, for science, you got to look at these kind of tools. You got to know what a microscope is. Remember, the microscope is there to look at small objects, very micro, small objects. A petri dish is there to grow. Remember, we use that petri dish to grow microorganisms, fungi, bacteria, those kind of things. A beaker is to store, whereas a graduate cylinder is to measure liquid. A thermometer is for heat, looking for heat change or change in energy, and the balance is there for mass. A balance is not there for weight, so remember that, mass, not weight. And then the safety, these are there anytime we ever use glassware, anything that's liquid or heating. The safety shower, and the eye wash container, make sure you know how to use those, as well as the fire extinguisher and the fire blanket. And finally, if there's ever a question and one of the answers says tell or ask the teacher, that's the answer. I'll tell you right now, if you see that as a question, that's the answer. Tell or ask the teacher is always the answer. And then here's that little story that we had, that levels organization. Remember, you start off with let me change this. You start off with an atom. So that should be an atom. Those atoms then join together to make molecules. Those molecules then join together to make macromolecules or organelles. Those organelles are then found in the cell. The cell then joins together to make tissues. If it's a bunch of skin, if it's a bunch of, let's say, muscle tissues, those muscle tissues make up the heart. The heart then joins together with all the blood streams to make an organ system. The organ system joins all with other organisms to make an organism. The organisms then make populations. And then if you have a bunch of different types of populations, you make a community, and then an ecosystem. And that includes both the biotic and the abiotic, and then finally the biosphere. And that's a larger section. And remember that here's that these two, this population and community, are the two ones that people are getting confused on those cards. And the population is all the same. It's all the freshman bodies. The community is the entire high school. So it's all the different types of organisms, but it's all the different types of populations. So then we broke into ecology. Ecology, remember that only 10% of energy is being passed along. So again, only 10% of the energy is being passed along. If you have a food web or a food chain, and again you have like your plants, and so here's your plant, only 10% is going to be passed on to your mouse, and then only 10% of that is going to be passed on to your cat. And so each time, only 10% is going to be passed on. And remember that energy is lost because of loss of like heat from your normal just daily processes. The only difference between a food chain and a food web is that it adds to it. So if you have several food webs, and then becomes a several food chains, you could get a food web. Remember these prefixes. Herb means plant, carne means meat, and omni means all around. So herbivore eats plants, carnivore eats meat, and omnivore eats both plants and meat, or animals. And a decomposer, or detrivore, then breaks down all those. And remember, if you have a change, let's say that the mouse dies. So this mouse now dies. What happens to the plants? Well, the plants will increase, but what happens to the cats? The cats will actually decrease, because there's not food for the cats, but less things are eating the plants, so the plants actually overchange. So just remember that if we have this big food web, if something changes, it's going to affect all the rest of them, just like how we did with the beans. In a symbiotic relationship, remember this is just a relationship between two organisms. There has to be that relationship. If there's no relationship, it's not symbiosis. And here's kind of a guide. Remember, you get your mutualism, commensalism, parasitism, and predation. And you just add these little pluses and zeros, pluses and minuses. It'll help you kind of help decide which one it is. And then this is the main thing, that parasitism and predation is that parasitism, the host does not die, whereas predation, there's death. Either the sheep is eating the grass or the lion is eating the gazelle. Ecological pyramids, these all look about the same, but there's a difference between them. The main difference is this. If here is your levels, this could be the biomass. So again, this could be the mass. This could be the number. Sorry, that's not the number. This is the energy pyramid. They look exactly the same, because the amount of mass is truly determined upon the amount of energy. But the numbers pyramid, remember this is the producers, and then the primary, and the secondary, and the tertiary. Remember the producers can support more primary, but the primary can support more secondary, so it's backwards. And then this is what's known as a biological magnification. This is the pollutant one. And what you need to remember is that this biological magnification, the higher up we go on the food web, the more, so if this we have like 2 or 3 dots here, then we got even more of these dots. And then once we get up here, there's all kinds of pollutants. So each of these dots relate to pollutants. So there's way more up here in this tertiary secondary level than in the primary or the producer level. find this idea of carrying capacity. Remember, they'll say this is the white-tailed deer population in Idaho County. As time goes on, the number of deer will increase. So it'll kind of go like this. But eventually it goes like that. Well, what that is known as the carrying capacity, or this K value. And that dark line right there is the K value. And the K value is basically how many deer, the amount of food, water, shelter, mates, will be actually be able to stay. So if our carrying capacity continues on up this way, all these deer are dead. They'll either die of starvation, they won't have enough mates, they won't have enough room to live. So that's what carrying capacity looks like. And we run over the nitrogen carbon cycle really quickly, but basically what you need to know is this. The nitrogen is found in plants, and then it has to go through each of these steps to be able to get back into the air to be absorbed again by plants, and it goes back into the cycle. Same thing with the carbon. Carbon is absorbed by plants as CO2. It's then released, is then eaten by some kind of herbivore, and it's then released back into respiration. The plants then pick it up. So it's a much quicker thing. But remember that carbon, if you go from plant to consumer, and then from herbivore, respires back to plant, there's also this part right here. If that herbivore dies, a decomposer breaks it down. Or if that plant dies, a decomposer breaks it down. So then it goes back into the soil, and eventually it can actually lead to fossil fuels. So decomposers are important both to nitrogen cycles where it breaks down and releases nitrogen, as well as the carbon cycle. And succession. Succession is, again, the development of vegetation over several years. So this is when we're looking at the island. And the main difference here, remember, is primary starts from rock or very, very dry deserty area, and secondary starts from something that's soil, and it's because of a natural disaster: fires, hurricanes, tornadoes. And this primary takes way longer, and your secondary will only take about 300 years. So hopefully that helps. If you have any questions or anything, make sure you come see me, and I will see you for the test. Good luck studying.